Joseph Stalin died on March 5, 1953, at the age of 74, following a massive stroke. In the days leading up to his death, he had been staying at his residence in Konstevo, just outside Moscow. On the evening of March 1st, Stalin failed to emerge from his room, which was unusual. His guards, too afraid to disturb him, waited for hours before finally entering the room and finding him lying on the floor, unconscious and partially paralyzed. He had lost control of bodily functions and could not speak. Medical care was delayed for nearly 12 to 14 hours as no one in his inner circle dared to act decisively without explicit instructions. When doctors finally arrived, they diagnosed a severe cerebral hemorrhage. Over the next few days, Stalin's condition worsened. He was largely unresponsive and his breathing became labored. He died on March 5th at 9:50 p.m., surrounded by top Soviet officials. His death triggered widespread mourning across the Soviet Union. Massive crowds gathered in Moscow for his funeral, and several people were killed in stampedes. Initially, his body was embalmed and placed next to Vladimir Lenin in the mausoleum on the Red Square. However, in 1961, during Nikita Khrushchev's campaign of de-Stalinization, his remains were quietly removed and reburied in a less prominent grave near the Kremlin Wall necropolis. Stalin's death marked the end of an era of extreme repression, and it opened the door to significant changes in Soviet politics, society, and international relations. At the time, World War II was almost over. Hitler was hiding in an underground shelter called the Führer Bunker in Berlin, Germany's capital. The Soviet army was very close, and he knew that Germany was losing the war. The day before, on April 29, Hitler married his girlfriend Eva Braun. The next day, they both decided to die. Hitler shot himself in the head, and Eva swallowed poison. They died together in a small room in the bunker. After they died, Hitler's helpers followed his orders and burned their bodies outside the bunker so enemies wouldn't find them. Later, the Soviet soldiers found what was left of the bodies. They used dental records to prove it was really him. Hitler's death happened just a few days before Germany surrendered. This marked the end of World War II in Europe. Benito Mussolini. By early 1945, Benito Mussolini's regime was collapsing. Italy had surrendered to the Allies in 1943, and although Mussolini was rescued by German commandos and made the head of a Nazi-controlled puppet state in northern Italy, the Italian Social Republic, his actual power was minimal. As the Allies pushed northward and partisan resistance grew stronger, Mussolini recognized that his situation was becoming desperate. On April 25, 1945, Mussolini fled Milan with his mistress Clara Petacci and a group of loyal fascists and German soldiers. They hoped to escape to neutral Switzerland or link up with remaining German forces. Mussolini disguised himself in a German uniform and a helmet, trying to blend it with a retreating German convoy. However, on April 27, near the village of Dongo by Lake Como, Italian communist partisans stopped the convoy and recognized him. He was arrested along with Petacci and other fascist officials. On the following day, April 28, 1945, Mussolini and Petacci were taken to the village of Gualina de Mezzagora. They were under the orders of partisan leaders, most notably Walter Artesia, who used to lies Colonel Valerio. Mussolini and Petacci were executed by a firing squad. Mussolini was shot against the wall outside a rural farmhouse. Petacci, who refused to leave his side, was also killed. Their bodies, along with those of several other fascists, were taken to Milan and publicly displayed in Piazza Loreto. The corpses were hung upside down from the roof of a gas station. Crowds gathered, some cheering, some jeering, and others spitting on or desecrating the bodies. The location was significant because the year before, fascist force had executed and displayed 15 partisans in the same square. Initially buried in an unmarked grave, Mussolini's body was stolen in 1946 by fascist supporters, hidden for nearly a year, and eventually recovered. In 1957, the remains were returned to his family and buried in his hometown of Perdapio, where his tomb still draws both historical curiosity and pilgrimages from neo-fascists. Mussolini's death marked the definitive end of fascist rule in Italy and came just days before Adolf Hitler's suicide and Germany's surrender. His legacy remains controversial also defined by dictatorship, alliance with Nazi Germany, participation in war crimes, and the brutal repression of dissent. Fidel Castro, the former leader of Cuba, died on November 25, 2016, at the age of 90. He had been sick for many years and had already given up power in 2008 to his younger brother Raul Castro because of health problems. Fidel had ruled Cuba for almost 50 years, first as prime minister, then as president. He became famous for leading a revolution in 1959 that overthrew the old government and turned Cuba into a communist country. After retiring from politics, Fidel mostly stayed out of the public eye, but sometimes wrote articles or appeared at events. When he died, his brother Raul announced it on Cuba television. Many people in Cuba mourned, while others, especially Cuban exiles, celebrated his passing. His death marked the end of an era in Cuban history. He was cremated and his ashes were taken across the country in a memorial procession ending in Santiago de Cuba, where they were buried.